All right, our next unit is going to be over natural selection and evolution. When people talk about natural selection and evolution, the first name that comes to mind is Charles Darwin. He's an English naturalist who gave us the theories we think of today that have been since modified, obviously, from his time. More evidence has come forth and things like that to show the theories have changed quite a bit, or things that he originally thought. He's not the only person who came with ideas about natural selection. People have always been trying to figure out, well, how did nature get the way it is? There's been arguments about that all the time. Darwin's the first one who really published a theory that made sense, that people were able to get behind with his evidence. He's well known for this time period, even today, for all those things that he did, his travels. It took him a long time. He just didn't overcome with it overnight. The concept of evolution, people argue about all the time. What evolution actually stands for is a principle in change in a population over time. So populations change over time. That means they see variations, they see differences, they see new mutations occur. Things like that that Darwin noticed and pointed out, that different parts of the world, different species showed up that were very similar to other ones, but not quite the same, and different types of traits show up. The early ideals that people had about natural selection, how we got the way it is usually based on folklore and mythology, things like that. How do certain things happen? Well, the gods created it. Zeus made a certain animal look this way. Things like that became things. Mythologies of different countries like India, how they got certain traits. There's lots of theories and mythologies that they utilize for how elephants got the way they were, or the way butterflies fly compared to the other insects. All those kind of things like that. And a lot of times people try to explain fossils because they would see a fossil and they didn't know what it was. They would say it must be this ancient monster or a god or something like that. So Darwin comes along in the age of discovery in the 1800s, and he's a young man, and the difference in his time period is he's from a wealthy upper class family, so he's got the ability to have studied and learned. He wants to go and have adventure, so he signs up to do a job. His job is to be a naturalist. He's going to work for the military. He's going to work on a ship called the HMS Beagle. He's going to be their naturalist. His job is wherever they go, he's going to look at nature, record it, bring back information, bring back specimens for the British Museum, and give it to them. That's his job. So as a naturalist, that's where he goes. Every port they went to, he would collect specimens and send them back to England. He's most famous, even though he traveled around the world, he's most famous for stopping in the Galapagos Islands. In the Galapagos, he noticed a lot of unique animals and unique things there, like tortoises. One thing about tortoises don't swim. Turtles do, tortoises don't. So how do they get on these islands? He was trying to figure all this stuff out. Figure out all these different bird species there that showed up, and very similar but not quite the same, but had little small differences in the way that they were put together, beak shape, things like that. He started looking at that and analyzing that theory. He spent 22 years after he got back from a 2-year voyage working on his theories. He was a cautious person. He wanted to make sure he was right. He really didn't publish until he got a letter from another person who has come up with similar ideas and said, what do you think about this? And he realized if he didn't publish, he was going to get beat to it. Now, he did give credit to the person, saying this person spurred me on to my understanding of this, so he did give credit to that person. Here's a trip that he went on, starting up here in England, went around South America, here to Galapagos, all the way across Tahiti, down here to Australia, back up around, and then circumnavigated back up to England. So that he did have a very large journey. He noticed things all over the world, differences but also similarities. So he started trying to figure out how they got there. How did it appear the way it was? He was influenced partially by a man by the name of Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus is actually an economist. He proposed that human populations grow faster than the Earth's food supply, but that we don't overpopulate because lots of things play factors in keeping the population at a certain level. He said, and when Darwin heard this, he said, well, this makes sense to animals too, but I don't have a name for it. How will we call this concept where things have a control over how things in nature work? So he basically said, well, why don't animals overpopulate then? They must follow the same rules. There must be checks and balances. There must be all these things that keep it in sort of a natural way. Competition for food. They have to compete for food. Who's better at it is going to survive. Who's not is not going to survive. Locating escaping predators. If you have better adaptations allowing you to hide, or if you're a better predator because you hide better, you have more speed than your prey, you're going to survive. Searching for a mate. If you can't find a mate, you can't pass on your traits. So if you have better traits that are good for that, you're going to be more successful. So what he came up with was a basic concept like this. Only some individuals survive the struggle to reproduce. So only some of them make it through all these trials in order to reproduce. He realized out in the world we had artificial selection. We would take sheep and breed them to get the traits we wanted. So if we have artificial selection, what happens in nature when it happens without humans involved in it. He called it natural selection. So he saw things like this, where you have a population of fish in a group. What happens over time is maybe some fish are just more successful. Like around here, our invasive species like Asian carp are more successful. So what happens is they outcompete and they become the dominant group, or everything else is almost gone. That's the kind of thing he saw in nature, was these natural selective events that drove species. So he came up with this concept of natural selection. All those checks and balances play a role. So he said this is a process for changing a population. Those with advantageous traits, ones that are successful. Not that you are the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, the smartest. It's your traits work the best. They just happen to fit with what you're doing. And the other guy who's also given credit with this theory is the man who sent the letter. His name was Alfred Russel Wallace. He's actually not like Darwin. He was growing up poor. He got a job being a hunter. He went around the world hunting animals and shipping them off for famous people to buy because they wanted them in their house for decorations. As he was traveling around the world, he noticed the same thing Darwin did. He noticed lots of interesting things throughout Asia, of how certain parts of Asia had animals that were like, or certain islands below Asia had certain islands off the Southeast Asia had animals from Asia, and ones a little bit further south had animals from Australia. Why? Why was there a difference? Why was there some different changes? He was the one who proposed these ideals to Darwin, and Darwin used them to help put the final theory together. Our modern thoughts, it's all about genetics. We know now that things that Darwin didn't have an advantage of, we know about genetics, we know about genes, we know about DNA. We see that those traits are just being passed on from one generation to another through the DNA. And those different versions of things are mutations. They're different concepts that occur within a population. So evolution now is defined as change the gene pool of the population. So as you change the potential genes in a population, you change the population. It evolves, it becomes something new. You can drive it one way or another based on all those selective factors. So an example like this. Start with the species, all of a sudden some of the species have the ability to dig, some don't have the ability to dig. It's just a mutational change. You introduce something like a predator, all of a sudden over time, all the ones that can't dig get eaten, the only ones surviving are the ones that can dig, and they start to build more and more adaptations until you end up with a very different animal, simply because it grew more, had more mutations. Over time, the mutations made it different. And so you end up with something like this.